The Ford Lightning is one of my favorite cars ever. It inspired many OEMs to build fast trucks of their own, and its influence is still felt today. If the Lightning didn't prove that people wanted fast trucks, Ford would have likely never produced the Raptor, which has imitators of its own. The Lightning occupies a strange place between ahead of its time and timeless. But what if I told you it had a sibling that was even more groundbreaking, but never saw the showroom? The Lightning truck was supposed to have an SUV sister named Thunder, but it never happened. Why haven't I, a huge fan of fast Fords, heard of this thing? Why was it killed? Was it middle management meddling? Bean counter budget restrictions? Why hasn't anyone talked about this car? No joke, what I learned forever changed how I see Ford. We're gonna find the Thunder. Like any story in quarantine, this all began with a video call. I was talking to an industry insider for another project when they let it slip that they worked with Ford back when SVT was still a thing. This piqued my interest because I'm a Ford fan, especially of the SVT cars. SVT stands for Special Vehicle Team. They were a division within Ford whose sole job was to build hot rods that Ford could sell to the people. They built some pretty awesome cars like the SVT Cobra Mustang, the first-gen Lightning, the second-gen Lightning, the SVT Contour, the SVT Focus, more SVT Cobras, the Ford GT, and the first Raptor. If you're a Ford fan, these are some of your favorite cars. Maybe one of the coolest things about the SVT lineup is that they were truly meant to be attainable. The second-gen Lightning cost about 45 grand in today's money, which is pretty good when you consider that dealers usually want around 70K for a Raptor today. My industry insider mentioned that SVT had worked on an SUV, which was weird because I'd never heard of this project. I needed to know more. I went to Google and found just 5 articles on the project. 5, and some of them were duplicates. I went over to YouTube and I didn't find anything. I got really excited. This was my chance to break a story 2 decades old. I'm gonna find this freaking truck. Using my connections, I was able to get in touch with John Coletti, who was SVT's chief engineer from 1994 to 2004. If there was anyone who could tell me about this SUV and knew where it was today, it was John. He laid out the formation of the SVT division at Ford.
You got to give credit to 2 people, and these are high-level executives, okay? And Bob Rui was the vice president of sales and marketing at Ford. So he kicked it off, and there was a gentleman, his name was John Plant. John Plant was the first SVT marketing manager. He worked for Bob Rui, and he was asked to put this organization together back in around, I'm going to guess around 1990, 91.
SVT was situated as its own division within Ford, complete with their own sales and marketing team, separate from what John called the mainstream Ford company. Oh, you listen to Ford? I'm more of an SVT fan. You've probably never heard of them. I mentioned earlier that SVT's goal was to build hot rods, but it's actually a little more complicated than that. Ford's strategy was to use SVT as a sort of polish on the Ford oval, using specialty products like performance cars to make the Ford brand more sophisticated.
When the person sits in the interior of the car, he should feel like he's in a special car. So we paid special attention to the seats, all the touch zones, we call them, the primary control touch zones. The steering wheels were unique. We put nice leather on there. We put nice leather on the shifter to give the guy a feeling, as soon as he got in the car, that he was special. There was something unique about this car, a unique instrument panel, for example. So, in that context, that's what the engineers were striving for.
This sounds like pretty standard fare for an OEM. Many manufacturers employ the same tactics today when they want to make an unassuming car more attractive. I mean, just look at Mazda or Hyundai. But something a lot of brands typically don't do is aggressively pursue the kind of people that would buy enthusiast cars.
We wanted to create a special sales experience, a special service experience. He was already pre-sold on the product, but now the experience was you need to handle him in a special way. Usually most dealerships would have 1 or 2 people that would sell the SVT product.
So what exactly was the SVT product? I thought the team just bolted on some go-fast parts and called it a day, but it turned out that was another false idea of mine. SVT was actually a lot more methodical than that.
The SVT product had to have a significant horsepower increase over the base model that it was coming from. Normally with performance vehicles, you always ended up with what people consider a pretty harsh ride. You really want to tighten up the suspension and everything else. We wanted a supple ride. It doesn't need to be a teeth-jarring, harsh ride.
SVT was exacting in their approach. They had to make their cars perform better in every way, but still engineer them to be comfortable and reliable so the customer could actually drive the car every day. Anybody can throw some coilovers on a car, but the real magic, the real skill is engineering something that doesn't become a chore to drive. Believe me, that is no easy task. I've ruined the ride on a few cars by changing up the suspension. You know, it's probably a good thing I'm not in charge of a performance division yet. I can see it now, Donut Performance Group. Putting skinny boys in everything, slamming everything, got louvers on the back. It comes with a free t-shirt. It's 1 million units sold right there. So through the 90s and early 2000s, SVT was putting out banger after banger, all of them classics, even the Contour. I mean, who doesn't love a compact sedan making 200 horsepower? That's sick. But how did SVT choose their next project in the first place? Well, that process was actually pretty straightforward.
You know, the fact that we were kind of limited to the Ford lineup of vehicles, we were always looking for what can we do with the SVT brand? Can we put an SVT brand on this particular kind of product or that product?
After working their way through most of Ford's 90s lineup, it was only a matter of time until SVT set their sights on one of the largest vehicles at Ford at the time, the Expedition. Hell yes, this is it. This is what we came for. The brainstorm for this idea must have been next level. A supercharged meeting of the minds so powerful you could hear tires screeching, smell the exhaust in the air as the team realized their genius. Or so I imagined.
One day, I remember one meeting, he says, "Hey, Coletti, you mind if we put a Lightning motor in an Expedition?" I said, "Well, that ought to be interesting, right?" And so they did it, and that's where the Thunder came from.
You know, you always hear stories about people like John DeLorean secretly building cars for Pontiac, or someone extending the line graph onto the wall, writing a few dollar signs to convince the higher-ups, but it's not always that interesting. Sometimes a guy named Coletti just says, okay. The build process was super simple. Since the F-150 and the Expedition used the same platform, SVT engineers took the suspension and drivetrain from the Lightning and threw the parts into the Expedition SUV. This is why I was so excited to hear about this car. This is a natural combination like peanut butter and jelly or pineapple and ham. You get the savory practicality of an SUV and that sweet, sweet power from a supercharged V8. Let me know what you think about Hawaiian pizza down in the comments. I welcome your opinion. The newly formed Thunder made 360 horsepower and 440 pounds-feet of torque and sent it all to the rear wheels. This honkin' SUV did 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds, nearly 4 seconds quicker than a stock Expedition. Talk about hauling groceries.
I still remember we were at Mile and Dragway. We had rented the track for something, and the guys brought the Thunder out. It had 3-row seating, so we had 8 people in it, and it still ran at 1387. I said, that's pretty damn cool. You can put 8 people in the thing, right? Still run a sub 14 second with a full-size SUV.
Not only was the Thunder quick, but SVT also fitted a Lightning-style bumper and wheels to the car, which totally completed the look. I gotta be honest, choosing between this or the Lightning would be like choosing between pineapple or ham. I gotta have both. Today, fast SUVs are everywhere. The Thunder was way ahead of the curve. Ford would have set the pace for the industry once again. The origin story for the Thunder was incredibly anticlimactic, but it did get me wondering why the suits at Ford didn't let SVT build this thing. The answer to that question kind of blew everything up.
In the case of the Thunder, part of it had to do with the fact that it had a limited life cycle and there was going to be a new Expedition coming. And this one was based on the old Expedition. So it was just a matter of timing.
John told me that if the Expedition had around 4 years left in its lifespan instead of 2, the Thunder might have happened, but it was out of his control. This was not an answer I was expecting. It seemed too easy, too reasonable. As my conversation with John went on, I felt my preconceived notions about Ford being challenged. When I first learned about the Thunder, the gears in my head started turning, and I started to blame its death on those faceless suits in management and the fun suckers down in accounting. We here on Donut have told countless stories of outlaw engineers building fun cars that flew in the face of company leadership. It's always a great story. But what I was learning was that it was just that, a story. I had built SVT up in my mind as a scruffy band of outcasts, defying the suits upstairs and building the cars they wanted on their terms. But that just wasn't the case.
And you got to keep in mind, in a company like Ford, and this is true for all big companies, when something like this starts up, you have to have some pretty high-level executives kind of protecting it to let it grow.
It turns out if corporations operated how I imagined them to, with divisions fighting and plotting against each other without a common goal, they wouldn't be very good businesses. When talking to John, he had nothing but good things to say about his time at SVT. It sounds like it was a really awesome place to work. I think the most important thing I've learned with this video is that sometimes the truth is boring. And that's okay. The Dyatlov Pass incident was just an avalanche. Those bears had the last name Berenstain, not Berenstein. Not everything is explained by some grand conspiracy. Sometimes things don't pan out because of factors that are out of your control. You just gotta move on and try your best on your next project, which is something SVT did a lot.
The old Thunderbird, the four-seater Thunderbird, I think we looked at it in around 94, 95, the SVT Bird. The problem there was when we found out when we were developing it, there was only another year left on the mainstream product. And everybody thought, geez, doesn't make sense to go ahead and put this in production for 1 year when the base product is going away, right? They were going to stop making the Thunderbird. Another one that didn't make it was an Escort Coupe. We made a turbo version of that. Internally, it was called the CT120. The trouble with that is that we just could never get it to have the refinement that we liked. So it ended up in the cemetery.
Those are just two examples of cars that SVT couldn't make happen, even if they were cool ideas, especially that Thunderbird. Just a quick side note, SVT actually did build one of these things and it looks super badass, but like the Expedition, the timing wasn't right. The important thing is though, the team didn't get discouraged and let those failures stop them from pushing forward. Despite the setbacks, SVT was able to keep moving and produce cars that we still talk about today. But still, after learning so much from John, there was still one question I needed to ask.
Do you know if there are any Thunders left around anywhere?
No, we only had the one that we built. Anybody can build one. I mean, it's one of those things that all you almost have to do is get all the parts lift off of a Lightning and stick it in an Expedition.
So I can't end this video with footage of us uncovering the Thunder prototype like I wanted to, how I planned out in my head. But hey, that's out of my hands. Sometimes things just don't pan out, and we should build one of these Thunders. A huge thank you to John Coletti for taking the time out of his day to talk with me and sharing his experiences and insights from the industry. I hope you found it as enlightening as I did. If you're a donut super freak and you want more content, hit that join button down below. Sign up for the Donut Underground. Check out our podcast, Past Gas. We got some more shows on the way. Follow Donut on social media at Donut Media. Follow me at Nolan J. Sykes. Tag me in some pics of your Lightnings if you got them. Be kind, take care of each other. See you next time.